Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Control+M Presents. Today we're going to continue our MRP education by focusing on MRP by buildings. We're joined today by our newest team member, Jim Porn. Jim came aboard last month. He's been a fixture in the Plex scene for a number of years. He started working with Plex back in 2008. We're really delighted to have him on our team, and even more delighted to have him show you what it takes to successfully run MRP by building. So without any further ado, take it away, Jim.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jim Porn, and I really am thankful today to have everybody to join us for Control+M Presents MRP by Building. Again, I've been around the Plex universe for quite some time, so I'm sure you've probably seen my name float around and had a chuckle at it. I certainly do. Let's just dive into it. So today we're going to be talking about MRP by building, and let's take a look at our agenda here. So what we kind of want to start with is what's really going to be the use case of when to use MRP building, and I think we've got a good use case kind of defined here for you that will really kind of demonstrate how the MRP by building is going to work. We're going to go through the setup, and especially what we're going to be focusing on are the settings that are going to be required. You probably won't need to take a lot of notes. This video will be posted to YouTube in the future. So in the event that you don't get all of the settings, all you have to do is go to our YouTube channel. By the way, anybody that happens to be watching on YouTube right now, if you hit the subscribe button at the bottom of the screen and click on the bell there, you'll get a notification every time that we post another Control+M Present session for you. Moving along through our agenda, once we get done kind of showing you all the setup, and that's going to take some time here, we'll actually do some show and tell. And most of the show is probably going to be done with screen prints or screenshots, so that we can actually see this and kind of talk through it. We're going to actually show the demand in MRP, or the demand that goes to MRP from the customer releases. We're going to show demand that's going to come from jobs as well. Then we're going to actually talk about fulfillment. And on the fulfillment side, we're going to show how to set up the purchase orders by building. And then once we get into MRP, we'll actually show how the demand is going to be broken down by both the buildings and then individually by building. And then once we get done with that, we'll go through and show you how to actually do the buying. So how to actually take that demand and turn it into a purchase order release in the multiple building buying. Once we get done with that, we'll do some questions and then kind of talk about our next session. So what is a good use case for doing MRP by building? I think in terms of talking about buildings, we really kind of need to understand, what's a good method for setting up buildings and why would you actually do that? So in many cases, you'll probably, some of you will probably set up with multiple PCNs. Some of you are set up with buildings. Having multiple PCNs is really important, especially if you have your buildings or manufacturing plants spread amongst multiple time zones. If you're doing EDI, especially multiplied across multiple time zones, and if you're looking to schedule those buildings separately. But if you're running from a single PCN and you do have buildings set up, there's two different cases kind of where you have buildings, and one's going to be a campus. I think of a campus as a group of buildings that are all together, really co-located in one place. I think of a campus as some place where you can take material from a high-low and run it across a parking lot over to the other building. So that's kind of a consideration. Probably using MRP by buildings may or may not work that well for you in a campus environment, especially if you only have like one receiving location. So if I receive everything in one building, kind of spread it amongst other buildings, you're probably going to want to do all of your material requirements planning as a campus or a group. But if you do have a building spread out, I do have clients out there that have buildings that are in the same city but they're miles apart. So in order to move things from building to building, we have to actually load things onto a truck and move them to a different location. And this is where MRP by building is really going to help you out. Okay. And that really kind of breaks down, you know, why you would use MRP by building and where it's a good example and probably where it's not a good example. I mean, using MRP building by building is good. For instance, if you make similar parts. So if if we're using an example of steel, for instance, we have a steel coil in each building, you may want to consider a coil in one building as available for a second building. But so planning around those things, the MRP by building will really help. What we're going to do is we're actually setting up an example for you. And our example is what we call the pizza example. And I don't know if you know this, but we love pizza at Control+M Solutions. So what we're going to do is we're going to make 2 different pizzas in 2 different buildings. So we're going to make a deluxe pizza in our west building, and we're going to make what we call a KP pizza in our east building. Now, the deluxe pizza in the west building is going to use 25 pieces of pepperoni. It's kind of dragon scaled on there, and of course adds a lot of fat to that pizza, but it's a really good pizza. Not to diminish the KP pizza, it's a good pizza as well, but it's got a little lighter pepperoni spread on it with only 10 pieces of pepperoni. So both pizzas are going to use the same component of pepperoni, but I'm going to want to order different amounts of pepperoni per building based upon the demand that comes through. Okay. So we're going to be talking about the setup. All right. Going through the setup, we're going to be going through buildings. We're going to show you the building configuration. We're going to actually talk about locations and also, or what we would call the location list if you're in the classic environment. Customer orders, we're going to show you how to set up how to ship to from a building. Then we're going to go into the parts. So we're going to show the 2 different pizzas, or the pizzas that are made in a different building and how to set that up, and how both are going to have pepperoni on the bottom. Once we get done with that, we're going to kind of go to the purchasing side of things, and we're going to go into supplier purchase order types and show you how to set up the supplier purchase order types so we can add a building to the header on a PO type. And then we'll go to we'll talk about ship tos, and then the purchase orders. We're going to need a separate purchase order for every ship to that we set up. And then we'll go over all of the settings that are going to be required to make this happen. So let's first talk about the building setup. Okay, so the building setup here, as you can see on our screen here, we've actually set up what we call an east and a west building. So this is what Control+M Solutions, this is right out of our PCN, and we've defined these 2 buildings. The east building is on the east side of the country, and the west building is actually on the west side of the country. So they are a good distance apart. Okay, so these are the 2 buildings we've set up. You will need to set up these buildings. It's always good to have the address in these buildings, how they're located. It's good for, especially when we're printing things, to pull all of that information from the building. All right, let's talk about locations. All right, locations are going to have a building assigned. So you'll note here, to store our pepperoni in each of the buildings, what I've done is I've created a location called an east cooler, which is a storage location, and a west cooler, which is a storage location. And you can see over here on the right, we've actually defined the buildings that these locations are in. So the east cooler is in the east building, and the west cooler is in the west building. Something to note here is if you have different types of locations, location types are probably going to be like storage locations. You're also going to have location types of work center locations that are going to also need to have these buildings assigned to them. But each location type must have the include an MRP checked in order for us to see the inventory that's going to be in all of these locations. Let's now talk about customer orders and the ship from. there's a setting, and this is basically the entire path to get to the setting, but the setting's called multiple building shipping. And what this does is it actually creates a field for us on our line item, on the line item page when we're entering customer orders. So you can see here that I've got customer order with a line item here that's called the deluxe pizza. And this deluxe pizza is going to be made in the West building. So when I scroll down on the line item, down to the approved ship to area, when I pick an approved ship to, so we're actually going to be shipping to the main location. Control+M Solutions is actually the buyer on this particular purchase order, but we're actually going to ship from the West location or the West building. Okay, so you want to have all your customers actually have this building defined where you're actually going to be shipping from. What this is going to do is ensure that demand gets into the MRP correctly. Okay, let's talk about the part setting. A lot of different part settings that are on there for building, for the building. If you just go into the settings manager and actually go, filter on the part list and then filter on the settings named building, you'll see this is fundamentally what you're going to see. So I've turned pretty much most of these on. So we have a building filter display for the customer part. We have a building filter display for the part. We're actually showing building on the grid for the part. And then what we're doing is also making available the main building display, which will add the main building field to the part form. And then a multiple building display, which is going to display all the buildings on the part form and give us the opportunity here, this multiple buildings for min-max inventory display. If you want to have minimum inventories by building, then you're going to have to turn this on as well to have this on. And of course, you can see this one's dependent upon that multiple building display. Whether or not you want to have the main building required is really going to be up to you. It depends on if all of your parts, it's pretty much going to be all of your components. If they're going to be building dependent, you may want to have that main building defined on there. Same thing with your finished goods. If they're all pretty much dependent upon a building, you may want to require that to be in there. Let's talk a little bit about the parts. And for example, here we're using our deluxe pizza again. So the finished good parts must have the main building defined on them. And where this is actually done is actually on the part information screen. So by looking at the part, as I scroll down, you'll find that field, and this is one of the fields that we turn on with the setting. In this case, we've defined that for our deluxe pizza, our main building is going to be the West building. Okay, and this has to be done for each one of your finished goods parts. Now, to kind of give you an idea of how our bombs are set up for each one of these pizzas, rather than actually go through and look at each one of the bills of materials, what I've done here is I've actually shown the component we're used. So we can actually see for this component of pepperoni on our deluxe pizza, as we said earlier, we're actually using 25 pieces of pepperoni for the deluxe pizza, and then for the KP pizza, we're using 10 pieces of pepperoni. Now, if you happen to be in a classic environment, this is basically going to be the bill of materials in classic. Now, in components, there's a bit of divergence here too between the UX environment and classic. So the component parts themselves, or the raws, whatever they happen to be, in this case, our component part is a pepperoni. They have to have a part building defined. Now, in the UX environment, in your action bar here, you'll note that there's actually a link that shows the part buildings. And this part buildings will actually take you to a separate page where we can define the buildings and the minimum inventory for each building. So you can see that I've defined both the East and the West building here for this pepperoni part. I created a default stock location. It's either the East cooler or the West cooler, depending upon the building. And if I want to define the minimum inventory quantity, I would do so here. And basically what that's going to do is allow you to set safety stocks for each building level. All right, I can also put in the maximum inventory quantity, but this is primarily just going to be for reference only. Now, if you happen to be in a classic environment, the part buildings will show on the part information screen. So turning on those settings will make this little responsibility area available. So the main building field will be at the top here. And as you can see, this would be where I would define which buildings these are in. I can define this default stock locations, and then minimum inventory quantity and maximum inventory quantity. Okay, let's move into the supply or the purchasing side of things. So on supplier purchase order types, we're going to want to make sure that our building picker is turned on. So this would be for any PO types that you have for, defined for like purchase parts, raw materials, whatever you're going to be breaking out by building. Of course, if you have other buildings set up, you may have to turn these on also for, subcontract or oh gosh, for doing supply items. That would probably be a good thing to have on. So this building picker, we need to turn this on. If you're going to want the building picker to be chosen every time we turn on or add a new purchase order, go ahead and check the required, and that'll make that a required field. Okay. Next part of setup is our purchase orders. On the purchase orders themselves, we're going to have to set up a ship to location for each one of the buildings. So the ship to location should be we give it a ship to code and an address of where we're going to actually send the parts to. So you can see we've got an east ship to and a west ship to. That's fundamentally where our purchase orders are going to direct our suppliers to actually ship the parts to. We'll need to create a purchase order header on each, for doing this. You can see I've got a purchase order header here. As I scroll down, as you can see where the owner is, that's where we'll see the building field. So we're going to want to populate that building field and also populate the correct ship to location on that header screen. We'll need to add line items as needed. So in this case for us, it's just going to be the pepperoni. And we'll also need to create a purchase order, a separate purchase order for each building and ship to. Okay. Talk a little bit about MRP settings. Give you a little bit of, here's the setting group of minimum inventory analysis is building filter display. The reason why I give you this is because we've got multiple settings that actually have building filter display in as the setting name. One of the other things we're going to want you to turn on is display all buildings in order to do MRP by building. Third one, you're going to actually have to put in a case with Plex to turn this on. You can turn these on in the test environment on your own, but this is a Plex only setting. It's called recommendations by building. So we'll want you to have Plex turn that on. Then we've got this last setting. It's a building filtered by display. It's in the MRP over time section. I prefer to set this to 2. It's default to 0. If you set it to 1, it's going to show all of the inventory in all the buildings on the MRP. If you set it to 2, it's only going to show the inventory by building. So this is really kind of the preferred way that I like to set this up. But you can set it up as your needs permit. So this is really kind of concluding all of the different setup that's going to need to do to make the MRP by buildings actually work. So going into kind of how we're going to show how this works, what I want to kind of emphasize here is we're really just using vanilla MRP. So we don't have any lead time on the parts. We're using standard order quantities, no standard order quantities, no minimum order quantities. We primarily want to just show the impact of how everything is broken out by building. We're going to show you how the customer demand is going to be set up. We're going to show you some job demand as well, and we've set up some jobs in each one of the buildings to kind of show how that's going to be broken out in MRP. And then we'll go into MRP demand. We'll show you the parent demand and the parent demand job that's in the system for it. And then we'll kind of go over how we can actually take this and turn it into a purchase order release with the multiple building buy. Okay, moving into the customer and job demand. You can see the customer I've got here is CMS. We've got one purchase order, but I'm actually purchasing two different line items. So I've got the deluxe pizza, and I've got an order, actually a release out here for 10 pizzas. So 10 pizzas. Remember, we said we got what 25 pieces of pepperoni on those pizzas. So I'll need at least 250 pieces of pepperoni to meet that. On the KP pizza, I've also got an order release for 10. On this particular one, I'm only doing 10 per pizza. So I really have some demand out there. It's going to be for about 100 pieces of pepperoni if we do the math. Same thing with down on the job demand. These are both going to have a due date of 11/23. Then on the job demand down here, you can see I've got a couple jobs in, and one's for a deluxe pizza. Again, I created a job for 10. We should have demand produced for 250. And the schedule is going to be, or the job completion schedule will be done on 12/7. On this KP pizza, I've got the scheduled job completion set for 12/8, and same thing, 10 pieces for both. So what's going to happen if I go out to MRP and actually not even filter by building? So that's one of the things we're going to show or actually see on our MRP screen is up in the filters. We should be seeing a building filter that's on here. So here's for both buildings, we can see pepperoni, no minimum inventory, no maximum inventory. I don't have any inventory. But as you can see, for the parent demand here, this is actually from the customers. This is demand. So you see both the 250 that's needed for the west plant and the 100 that's going to be needed for the east plant together. The jobs are kind of spread out over a couple weeks here. So I'm going to see this 250 is basically for that deluxe pizza for the job that we created in the west plant. And the 100 over here is going to be for the KP pizza that we're going to be making in the east plant. Okay. So if I go through and go up to the top and do filter by building. So if I filter only by the east building, you can see I've got pepperoni here. And on my parent demand, I'm only showing the 100 that's going to be needed for the KP pizza. This is from the customer demand, and the 100 that is needed for the job. And that's all we're going to see. By the same token, if I go out and I refilter for the west building, I see my demand for 250 that comes from that customer order, and I see 250 that goes for the jobs. Now, we did this really on purpose to actually set up our jobs after that customer demand was required. And the reason why we did that was we wanted to show you the job demand that was coming through, and we wanted to show you the customer demand. Now, a few weeks ago, Patty did a Control+M solutions presentation on netting. And so what you're really seeing here is not any double dipping, but that netting section really showed how things are going to be netted out. So if you have any questions about that, I would really direct you to that last session that we did on YouTube, and that will actually show you how things are going to get netted out in MRP. Okay. So now we've gone through that. Really kind of want to show you how to do a buy. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to demonstrate this live. So I'm going to go out here and as you can see, I have filtered on my part of pepperoni. I filtered on my building of the east. As we can see, I've got this parent demand out here. What I recommend you do is do this with multiple sessions. I would say that the recommendation screen when using MRP by building is not as robust, but I can still get my demand from this screen here and generate releases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this value. And as you can see, I've got another session over here that's basically set up on my purchase order that I've created for the east building. and here's my line item for pepperoni, and here's the release. So all I need to do is just copy that quantity in here and put in the due date of when I'm going to need it. So I'm going to need it by the 23rd. I'm going to hit apply here, and my release is in the system. As I come back here, I should see, if I hit search, you'll notice that that demand now has been met by a purchase release, and everything turns green. Okay, that's probably the best way to kind of build up your releases and set up releases by building. So I can actually see here again, pepperoni on the east side. I would do the same thing for the parent demand, for the job demand. Create another release so that I have that material coming in. Let me go back to my presentation here. So what's going to happen? This is kind of what I call the what if I section. So what if I forget something on a record? So what if I forget a purchase order on the purchase order if I don't put the building on the purchase order? The key to that, it's not going to display the building on the MRP release planning screen in the approved supplier section, and we're not going to get those releases or the purchase releases properly shown on the MRP screen. Same thing with sales orders. If I don't put the building on a sales order, that demand's not going to be separated by building in MRP. So if you don't have a building on the order, when you filter by building, you won't see any demand. Okay, but when you actually do all buildings, you'll see all the demand that's going to be there. Same thing with the job. The demand's not going to be separated by building on MRP, so I have to actually have the job, the building on the job itself as well. So if you don't see have a building on the job, when you filter by the building, you're not going to see any demand. On the part building on the components are going to define which building will use this component, and again, that's kind of where we're going to define that minimum inventory there as well, so we can set safety stocks if needed by building. On the work center, same thing. Work centers, locations. If I don't have the buildings on the work centers, if I don't have the building defined in the location, we're not going to see that inventory tracked by building. It's just going to go across all the buildings. So to kind of summarize here, the MRP by building is really going to be reliant on having really good, accurate, and complete data. So, if you forget something, if you do a what if I, which I have a tendency to do sometimes, any forgotten record is going to cause kind of an imbalance or supplier demand. So a best practice to really kind of look through these is one, run MRP wide open and look for those outliers. So turn off the building, set the building filter to none, run it wide open. If you see anything that's really going to look kind of different or something you're not expecting, it should draw you to where the problem's going to be. And then, having some exception reports to identify those critical records where we don't have the buildings defined, whether we're setting up ad hocs or IntelliPlex reports that show if we've got some of those building records missing on some of our records, that'll help you all as well. So I guess that kind of ends this presentation for me. I really look forward to maybe hearing some questions from the group if we have any out there.
Hey, thanks, Jim. To the folks on the call, if you've got any questions, don't forget to unmute yourselves. In a fairly small crowd today, Jim, not a lot of folks are actually using MRP by building, so.
Right. But I know there was some interest in it from the last session, so.
Right.
It's good that you came out there, and of course, again, to reiterate, it's going to be available on YouTube very soon as well.
It's like Drew unmuted.
Yeah, I just had a question about, and I said it sounds like you want to point me to Patty's session on netting, but it looked like you were double counting the demand of what you needed with the parent job, and it just seemed like
you're absolutely right.
You have the parent of 100, and then you have the job demand of 100, and so
sure. Let me look let me look at the West here. And again, what I did, Drew, is I set this up specifically so that I didn't want my job to go ahead of my, and this is really what Patty's session was all about, is if my job demand is after, the parent demand, it will show both. And I wanted it to show both because I wanted to show how the job demand would show up and the parent demand. Had I set my job ahead of this parent demand would have been, the job would actually supersede the parent.
Drew, the way I like to explain it is this. We have an order that's due on Tuesday, but we have a job that's due on Friday. Plex says you can't fulfill Tuesday's orders with inventory that won't exist until Friday. So I don't know why you're making the job on Friday. I don't care why you're making the job on Friday, but you need to make another one to fulfill your Tuesday order. So that's why it's driving demand. Make sense?
Yeah. So my purchasing team basically should focus on parent demand when they're ordering, and not just the the 500. We don't want them ordering 500 if we only need 250.
Technically, if that is the case, because one of two things is going to happen. Either your ops guy is going to find a way to get that job done early, or you're going to deliver to your customer late. So what you really need to do is just tell Plex the truth. Tell it what you're actually going to do.
Okay.
Right. Yep, and that's the case. And to be honest here, this was our case. We ordered some early, and here's the thing: is these things will happen too. You'll get orders that will pop in, so you'll see things turn red, and that's an indicator that we need to, that we've got an exception out there as well that we need to address.
Well, great, Jim. Thanks for explaining that. So appreciate your time, Jim, on this. If you want to flip down to our last session, once again, Jim, you've shown everyone that if you're disciplined and you tell Plex the truth, you're going to get some pretty amazing results out of this software. So please join us at our next session, scheduled 2 weeks from today. It's going to be on label creation. Plex labels are pretty flexible. We've got a couple of folks on staff who love making them, and they've come up with some ideas to make it easier for you. So if you're interested in learning more, or maybe you've never even created one on your own, join us to see how easy it can be. So thank you to everybody who attended. We at Control+M have much to be thankful for, especially for you sharing your time with us. And we want to wish you and your families a safe and healthy Thanksgiving. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.